uh, yeah. I guess you don't read that in the synagogue either, do you?
I've heard it read very often, no.
Pardon?
I don't think I've heard it read very often, no.
Well,
Not that I
it's
can
not
recall.
something read in the Sunday morning exactly, I guess, but it should be studied, I think, because it's quite an important story.
Right.
Uh, what's important in this story, if I can just say one thing, is the first word in Hebrew. It's called Vayeshev. And Vayeshev means to, it's translated, I forgot, different ways in English, reside or dwell, but it has the word, Yoshev in Hebrew means to sit. It's kind of a permanent dwelling. It's not a temporary dwelling. There's other words for if somebody is a ger, lagur, that's more of a temporary dweller, a so-called sojourner. It's translated in those translations. But this is a more permanent dwelling, and yet it doesn't really take place. But that's his intention. After all the things he's done, he's been off away from the land for many years. He's finally come back now. He said, well, I think I'll be reside here and I'll just settle down and relax and things will be fine for me here. But it turns out to be just the opposite. He's going to have even more troubles in his own land here. So that's kind of that word kind of portends. It has double intent. It has a intent of residing calmly and peacefully, but it's not going to happen that way. So there's irony in there. So
oh, right. I see. Yeah. Yeah.
The word specifically means something. It's a permanent thing, sort of dwelling in peace, in stability, if you will. Not just kind of wandering around from place to place. I'm back in my land here. By Yeshev, I'm going to still sit here. I'm going to live my life here, get things together here. I'm not going to go off all kinds of other wanderings and challenges with my brother, all that kind of stuff anymore. I just got the genealogy of him, the chapter 4, listed there, put him off till later times. And so now I'm going to Vageshev. I'm going to sit here and just kind of take my life. But it turns out not to happen that way. So that maybe tells us something about retirement and that nobody ever really retires, do they? They have to still be looking out for what's going on in life in some sort of way. Yeah.
Reminds me of Bilbo Baggins from The Hobbit. He's quite happy in his home, and then a wizard comes knocking on his door and completely disturbs him. Yeah, takes him off into an adventure.
You know, I find it interesting that, and I don't know if it happens to any of the other characters in the Tanakh, but all of a sudden, in verse 13, it's Israel said to Joseph, right? Like typically when someone is renamed, their past name is no longer used, but Jacob kind of goes back and forth between Jacob and Israel, right?
Hello?
Hello?
Sorry, that was
so you know, it's interesting that at the moment when Jacob tells Joseph, this is where you will find your brothers. So you know, it's sort of a watershed moment. You're going to find your brothers, and then you're going to disappear for a number of years, right? That they use the name Israel.
Yes, which means to
you
wrestle,
know, like
doesn't it?
Yeah,
I mean, struggle with God, right?
Struggle.
You know, is Jacob wrestling with should I tell Joseph where his brothers are because I know something bad is going to happen. Something's going to happen, right? Like, but and again, typically, like Avraham is never called Avram again. You know, like names are typically like once you're assigned a new name, then your other name is dead, right? But Israel and Jacob kind of go back and forth here, right? I don't know how important that is, but it's always struck me.
Very important, yes. Because it sort of violates what it said back we read last week. No longer shall your name be called Yaakov.
Yeah, exactly. It will be Israel.
It doesn't do it that way. Abraham, you're right, is pretty consistent. Although there is one place later in where Avram's name is mentioned, sort of in passing.
Yeah. but anyway, because all through the Joseph story, it's like, well, Jacob, Israel. Oh, whoa. Like it jumps out, kind of thing, right?
In one of the things that I read, it said that this was a way to show that Israel, in the form of Joseph, would be in Egypt. This was the first time that Israel, in the form of Joseph, would be in Egypt. And then, yeah.
So this would be specifying a sort of national character or national impulse, more than just the use of the word Jacob. Then I get it.
Yeah, sort of. Yeah, both. And like like David said, Israel means struggle, or thereabouts. And this is a huge watershed moment for the Hebrew people.
But it's calling other stories because Abraham was in Egypt also. So it obviously, Egypt is kind of, there's a whole PhD thesis style of quotes together. Yeah. Egypt and the Bible. Is it good or is it bad? It's both, because that's where somewhere out in the desert there is where the Torah comes from. And then, there's all the slavery, but then they let them off the hook then. And so it's a whole lot of things too.
And what's the significance of the tunic then? Tunic.
It doesn't mean a coat of many colors.
No,
that's good. That's a beautiful story.
No, it's just a sign of favoritism. I think Jacob.
It's some sort of pleated coat.
Jacob knew what it was like to have parents who played favorites. So
the only other time that the word for and I don't have the Hebrew in front of me, so I can't tell you what the Hebrew words are. But the only other time that phrase for that tunic appears is in reference to Tamar wearing a princess's tunic. So read into that what you may, but that's the only other time that type of tunic is mentioned is with Tamar.
Yeah,
it sounds like some sort of a beautiful. Okay.
Pardon me? I didn't hear what you said, Dave.
Oh, it's ketunet is the Hebrew for it. I just looked it up.
No, I meant Dave Puxley. He said something, but it was so there are
sorry, I was just trying not
to in this group.
Oh man, I remember a song about that. No, so the question for me then, like if it's like a princessly or a princely robe in that sense, it certainly seems to speak to favoritism, but it also seems to me that Joseph is the baby of the family. And, I've known some folks who have grown up in that position of birth order. I was the second of two, but like someone who's the second of a whole whack or the last of a whole whack of kids. Sometimes, as here, the child of his old age, a kind of a surprise baby. And those kids sometimes do, in terms of birth order, have peculiar challenges of everybody attempting to parent them or everybody attempting to direct them. And it has, in some of the folks that I've met, led to certain kinds of disempowerment or infantilization or other things, or compensatory grandiosity, Is
it Benjamin younger? Aren't they from two separate, two different mothers, right?
Yes.
Is
Benjamin younger than him? I thought he was the youngest
Joseph
of all.
is the youngest of
they're both
that
sons
mother,
of Rachel.
and isn't Benjamin younger?
I thought he was.
He was born when Rachel died in childbirth.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Benjamin is Joseph's physical brother by both.
Yes.
Yeah, they have a shared mother.
And I mean, Benjamin plays, like the role when Joseph's brothers come to Egypt and that whole story, right?
But I think that idea of Joseph still being one of the younger ones anyway, to me that story, the opening of the story, kind of plays up or shows up his childishness. It's almost a surprise to realize he's 17. It's like, oh, I have a dream. Do you want to hear about it?
Exactly.
And I have another one. You're going to love this too. And you're thinking you're a fool. And sure, at 17, I would have thought, you'd be a man, you'd be grown up, you might have a man's responsibilities, and yet he's sort of foolish about what people want to hear. And it's like he doesn't seem to be leading a terribly responsible life that, go here, fetch your brothers, take this message. And so to me, 17 in that world might have suggested a more grown-up person than he really is. But obviously he grows in time. But at this point, he's sort of a bit young and silly is almost what comes across to me.
Well, it's this role of dreams too, right? And he seems to take his dreams more seriously than his brothers do. They're because just of how they respond, right? To me, I find that something that's really interesting about this text is that they just dismiss him as a dreamer. Let's say it's like, get real. You're 17, we're older. they've obviously dealt with this behavior for a while.
Oh yeah,
because they just don't like him.
And Jacob is not stupid. He's not unaware of his son's faults, but he doesn't let that deter him from choosing him anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that says something about parental authority. That it goes contrary to the evidence, but there is something in Joseph here that I have to acknowledge here, despite the fact that I see I'm not stupid. I see what my other sons are saying about him, but I also see more than they do. I am Yisrael. I have struggled with God here, and somehow Joseph is going to be the some kind of output of all of that. Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. I also think that when you're younger in age in a larger family, that you have more siblings that get to witness your treatment, because we never really consider how we've been treated. We really don't. We just look at how others are treated. And so you've got this whole united front of siblings who look at how one sibling is being treated and say, whoa, I mean, yeah, the special tunic or whatever. Okay. Yeah, that kind of separates them. Right. But at the same time, there's definitely, he's under the microscope, let's say, with his, and the tunic didn't help. Yeah.
It does raise the question for me. Often, names are significant, Abraham or Israel. What would a literal translation of Yosef be?
Increase.
Increase.
Yeah.
Add to, additional. So that's because if you look back where he's given the name, that's what it refers to. But that's clearly what the word is. Modern and ancient Hebrew both. So he's
that's interesting.
He's the one who
Jehovah has added.
That's interesting.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
It's important in Genesis to know these names, what they mean.
There's a really wonderful First Nations edition, English translation of the Bible, and it does this. It translates names literally, and I think it's just like the most amazing take on these stories. When you're reading things like and father of many nations said this, and struggles with God said that. Right? There's a different sensibility that comes out of it for me. Right?
Yeah,
so the sense of thematics feels like it comes to the forefront.
Is that the whole Bible? Because I think I had the New Testament version of that. I've used it before.
I think there's a New Testament and maybe Genesis. I don't know if the whole Bible.
Yeah, I don't think the whole Bible is. I know for sure that the New Testament is. Actually, I have it bookmarked on Amazon.
Oh, right on.
And I think Debbie Feist used to read from that one a lot.
She did. Yeah.
But I don't think there's a complete Tanakh.
Oh, it hasn't been totally
like you say, maybe Genesis, but I don't think there's a complete Tanakh.
Yeah, it's a really it's inspirational reading that way. Yeah, I like it a lot.
And Joseph is used as a prototype for Jesus often in theology as well. There's a lot of similarities. He's put into a hole or a tomb. the even the bloody tunic, the pieces of, was it gold or silver that they sell him for? It's 20 pieces.
Silver.
20.
Yeah.
Not quite the same amount, I don't think, but
he goes down to Egypt.
He goes down to Egypt.
You know, Jesus went down to Egypt, right?
I mean, perhaps there'd been a certain amount of inflation by the time Judas gets at it, so it had to be 30 instead of 20, right?
Yeah.
And quantitative easing on the shekel.
tunic is like a shroud when you think of it in this story, because what Jacob gets back is a bloody tunic. It's like, wow. Yeah, that kind of reminds me of the shroud of Turin or something. Yeah.
And when I was looking into it, the 20 shekels of silver is what a boy of that age would have cost at that time.
Wow.
Yeah.
Right on.
Oh. Good. Any other thoughts on this?
Just the complete lack of harmony within the family. And you see it going along just in terms of how the brothers operate, how they of course, how they treat Joseph, but also how they actually, do they actually care about their father's feelings in the midst of all this and what happens there, right? There's a lot going on in terms of disharmony, and to the point that you have to ask yourself, where can the reconciliation ever come from?
Yeah. And how do they live with that for all those years afterwards, knowing that Joseph was not killed but sold into slavery and hiding that from their father? It's
Yeah, I mean, the question because we get the benefit of reading the text, looking in the rearview mirror. But I mean, if you look moving forward and you just consider the circumstance and just what a what a gong show it is. You talk about dysfunctional families. I mean, I don't think we ever go through the book of Genesis and find an episode of Father Knows Best, let's say, or something like that. This is a totally different. This is a world where we encounter the human propensity to screw things up time and again.
Do you think Jacob had any idea that Joseph would survive and that he would be found in the future? If he chose him for this purpose and then thought for 27 years that he had chosen wrong, or that the faith wouldn't continue, or do you think he had any hopes or thinking that he would be found again?
Yes. Because it says it right at the beginning there, because he sees that this is here, there's something happening. He doesn't, there's all kinds of evidence to the contrary of what you just said, but he still believes it anyway. And he's not going to be comforted, and he's going to stay in mourning all this time. And so that's kind of an interesting thing to do. There's probably people in this world today that things are happening, and things across the Mediterranean, Ukraine, and things like this. And the people who go through these things, they don't know what happened to people. So,
And back to about the names. Like, I wonder if that is why the name Israel was used here, right?
Yeah.
Like Dale said, struggle.
Yeah.
He Israel, Jacob struggled, right? Do I send him? Don't I send him? Do I send him? Don't I send him? It's kind of like it's a struggle of faith, right?
Yeah, I was
because
sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say I agree. Like I think Israel knew that Joseph had some sort of, I hesitate to use the word destiny, but
good word.
Yeah, the
is.
family is struggling as well. There's struggle within the family, and the family is Israel. These are the tribes of Israel. Yeah.
That shows that true faith keeps multiple balls in the air at one time. Yes, and juggles the ball, even negative ones, even good hopes, bad hopes. You put them all together and you learn to live with all of them. Otherwise, if that's what I keep saying, this proves my theme. I keep saying to live a religious life is to live in the middle of things, not at either one extreme in that. Because if you go to one extreme or the other, you've missed the whole point of it. Living in the middle is difficult. It's much easier just to give it up altogether, just move on to things, or just to totally give up hope altogether, just opt out. But no, I'm going to stick around. I'm going to keep all of it together here, despite the fact that evidence doesn't seem to be that way.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Not give up. Yeah. Yeah. That's important. Yeah. Good.
Sorry, Diana, you were going to say something.
No. It was just sort of to follow up on what you were saying. This idea of struggling. I would assume that as a father who was bereft at what appears to be the loss of his son, there would have been real questioning of God. Like, why has this happened? And that kind of struggle too, right?
Yeah.
But you see it right at the beginning of the beginning of this text, it's hatred, and at the end of the text, it's grief. And if there aren't any, and I think of two things that actually drive so much of the dis-ease within human relationships, it's got to be those things, right? Hatred and grief, and what it causes, what they cause,
and jealousy, which ties in with the hatred.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And even though Joseph matures a lot through the years and his struggles in Egypt, he's still, I seem to remember that there's still some of that young Joseph still in him when his brothers come to Egypt as well. He's not completely reformed.
Oh, well, yeah, that's fair. Like people remain who they are, right?
Yeah.
I mean, one of my favorite examples of that, I think, in all the scriptures, got to be Paul. He's like brash, loud, throws rocks at people. One day, the next day, he's brash, loud, throws words at people. He's still Paul. He just like, woof, he just like turns his energies in a different direction, right?
Yes.
He probably still had a love of writing lists before he was writing letters.
Lists of people to be persecuted.
I suspect. Yes.
Cool. Do you want to look at another text?
Yeah, but there is a transformative thing that happens with Joseph, right, in the end. I mean, the fact that he goes from being, let's say, the least to actually being who he thought he would be. There's an absolute transformation there that takes place.
Oh, yes. Yeah, I believe that as well.
Point. Yeah.
Maybe this is next week's reading for us, but he's going to see the things that were mysterious and cryptic at the beginning. All of a sudden, they actually did come true here. But it wasn't the manner in which it happened and what actually did happen. Both the fact and the process of it are not what I thought it was going to be. Nobody could predict those things.
Yeah.
It was all highly, sketched out. No details at all. Which is, again, that's the way it should be also. You don't need to know every definite step along the way. No, that's not the way life works.
Yeah.
Cool.
Very good.
What would you like to look at next?
What do we got next?
I don't mind because I'm preaching on this text and it's mentioned in this one. So.
Yeah.
I'm getting fed up of the Psalms. It's like, give me a break. But we could look at it if you'd like to. So.
Yeah.
The whole psalm, the whole point of that is interesting because
Psalm 105.
That was obviously meant by somebody who was speaking to a group of people. And he wanted to give them the whole story, not just the Joseph story. And I didn't read the whole thing, look at it, but I could, I've got it here. But I want to give you this whole story here. There's something here we get maybe the first historian together here. And not just instance here. The whole thing has a thread to it. and it's over a period, and then maybe it's the first real historian in history that's really putting things together here and telling history. And learn from history. Don't just look at a bunch of isolated facts and instances here. There's something that ties all this together here. That's what history is about. I've been reading R.G. Collingwood, who that's his whole basis of his philosophy is history. And so it fits in very well with this psalm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Good.
In some ways, the psalm sounds very much like some of the openings of Eucharistic prayers in the Anglican tradition, where we speak about this sort of history in that sense before we turn to, sort of Eucharizing the elements, right?
Yeah, I did that on Sunday. We had communion. We have it tends to be once every 3 months or so. So in the liturgy, there was quite a history there, which I went. Yeah. 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 Okay.
Yeah. So Israel came to Egypt.
Yeah.
I like that.
Do you want
Jacob
to look at
lived as
another
an alien.
text?
Let's look at the Matthew text for fun.
Yeah. Sure. Okay. Matthew. Jesus walks on the waters or by the waters. Matthew. If someone has the text on them, that would be great.
22. Okay. All right. Here we go. Immediately, Jesus made the disciples get into the boat and go on ahead to the other side, while he dismissed the crowds. And after he had dismissed the crowds, he went up the mountain by himself to pray. When evening came, he was there alone. But by this time, the boat, battered by the waves, was far from the land, for the wind was against them. And early in the morning, he came walking toward them on the sea. But when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were terrified, saying, "It's a ghost!" And they cried out in fear. But immediately Jesus spoke to them and said, "Take heart, it is I, do not be afraid." Peter answered him, "Lord, if it's you, command me to come to you on the water." He said, "Come." So Peter got out of the boat, started walking on the water, and came toward Jesus. But when he noticed the strong wind, he became frightened and beginning to sink, cried out, "Lord, save me." Jesus immediately reached out his hand and caught him, saying, "You of little faith, why did you doubt?" When they got into the boat, the wind ceased, and those in the boat worshipped him, saying, "Truly you are the Son of God." There we go.
Sort of as an aside, but one time when I was in Israel, I was getting ready to go on a boat in the Sea of Galilee, and it was perfectly calm. And you know, this passage always comes to mind because it was perfectly calm, and then all of a sudden it was a thunder and lightning storm, and I have never seen waves appear so fast.
Wow.
In all my life.
Wow.
And I've lived next to the ocean all my life. But it was calm and it was boom, right?
Yeah.
Like and
Wow.
we weren't allowed to go on the boat, right? Like it was canceled because it was just too rough to take the
People
boat
of
out.
little faith, what's the matter with you?
Yeah,
Just wait 10 minutes, it'll change and calm down.
that's right. There'll be a rainbow.
Right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Oh,
Yeah. What an experience, though.
You know?
Wow.
no kidding.
But yeah, you know, we were literally walking towards the boat and the storm just came out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Right.
Wow. I mean, just as a natural experience is powerful, but the metaphorical dimension of that,
Yes.
speaks very quickly, right? You don't know when the storm is coming. Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
So what is Peter supposed to do here? And is this all this thing about faith, by faith alone ye shall live? Is that all you have to do? Just have faith, and then you can walk on water and do things? Is that what's happening here, or you just have to have faith there to get across there? No, get with it. Have faith, or is there's more to it than that?
I mean, that's one reading for sure. And lots of people do take that reading.
But I have a feeling there's, I want you to say a little bit more.
Shoot, I was buying myself time there.
I'll give you a little more background to it. I don't think it's not just you can take it just as some kind of miracle story, but I don't think it may be that, but it may be more than that too. So that's
why. Yeah. Well, I think theologically it's supposed to be pointing out by some Jesus divinity because he has the power over the waters, which God does. That's part of it. But I'm not sure about the Peter part.
The doubt, the piece about doubt, I think, is don't throw away that where he says, why did you doubt? Right? You have little faith. Why did you doubt? And I think that sometimes we need to pay a little more attention to that doubt when it occurs and where that doubt comes from in our lives, even, right? I mean, that's the activity of Satan, right? Is the sower of doubt. I mean, time and again through the scriptures, that's what the adversary seeks to do. But so it's that question, I mean, to me, that's the question we can always be asking of ourselves. You have little faith. Why have you doubted? Why did you doubt? What was it? But when you think of, for example, people, and again, this happens in Matthew as well. You have passages that focus on worrying, right? And a lot of that has to do with doubting, right? Doubting my safety, or doubting my security, or doubting that there's provision for me, right? All of those things. So that's and when we doubt, that moves us to behave differently, let's say, than if we don't doubt, right? So,
I think doubt though can be very positive, right? Like if we don't question, if we don't struggle with the text, if we don't struggle with our faith, then what is it, right? Because mom and dad were Catholic, I should be a Catholic. Because mom and dad were Baptist, I should be a Baptist, and that's what I believe. You know, like if doubt isn't necessarily a negative thing.
I'm not saying it's a negative thing, but I think it's important for us to think about our doubt and how it changes our behavior.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, I think
people doubt when they don't need to doubt, and that's an issue as well. Sometimes doubt just becomes a lifestyle or an orientation. I'm going to doubt, but I'm just going to be a doubter of everything. And where does that actually lead a person? Especially in terms of being able to trust anybody.
Sure.
Yeah. Can I try to put what all your things are saying together? There's kind of little doubts. Judy, you talk about this, doubt this, and you need to question little things, but there's also a really fundamental doubt, which is kind of what you're talking about there. And that should not enter into it. That gets back to the Jacob story. And Joseph. Because Joseph, he does not, we kind of conclude that Jacob does not doubt this. He still sees the sign. He pays attention to it. He pays attention to his son's dreams, and that he can't explain it fully, but he does not doubt. And so maybe that's what's happening. I'm trying to think this is maybe that's what's happening with Peter here. He's kind of looking at little things here, looking at this here, looking at the water, the storm. Hey, just keep on going in there and keep something together there. I'm trying to
put
interesting.
I love it. I don't know what the Hebrew word is, but it says he began to sink. So you think about that sinking. In terms of
well, I mean, you make a really great point about like the limiting of these things, right? Because at first he says, if it is you, Lord, tell me to come on out of the boat. Right? There's a moment of what I think we could call like Judy's sort of constructive doubting, right? It's like, all right, so demonstrate. And once he's there, he's happy to step out of the boat. But it's when another adverse condition shows up, when wind or something else starts pushing on him, he's like, well, can I do this as well? Almost, right? Like there's a moment where, are you still going to love me now? Are you still going to love me now?
So he's a
sort
doubting,
of question going on there.
You're doubting Thomas. He's a doubting Peter.
No, I don't know. I mean, Peter gets out of the boat. I wouldn't have got out the boat in the first place. Peter gets out.
Well, that's Peter's way.
Yeah,
he's a preacher of great enthusiasm as well.
Yeah.
But I guess I was.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I'll just say one real quick thing because I have to go very shortly. But there's a wonderful transition in Rene Descartes' Meditations on First Philosophy where he's entertaining all of these doubts about what he knows, what he understands, what he sees with his senses. And eventually, when he gets to the point of saying, so I know that I am, and I know that in me is a conception of God prior to my knowledge of myself, he can then turn around and name all of his other doubts as hyperbolic and deliberately so.
Yeah.
Right? To get him to the point of that thought experiment. So but he meets a limiting term, right? Whereas like past this point, those doubts show themselves to be hyperbolic or exaggerated or for the purpose of a thought experiment, but not really having a purchase on reality. And that's not an easy distinction for human beings, I think, to make because we have such partial and limited views of things. I hear somebody knocking at my office door, so I've got to go. But thank you. We'll see you next week.
Have a good week.
In M. Scott Peck, he has a book called Golf in the Spirit, and he basically does 18 holes of golf and reflects on it, theologically and through the spirit. And anyways, he has this one section, and he talks about what he describes as paralysis by analysis.
Yeah,
where it comes to swinging his golf club and all the things if he starts considering all the things that he has to do in order to swing a golf club, that he gets to the point where he just can't swing a golf club.
Mm-hmm.
Because he's thinking about, and there's that kind of thing going on here, because it says, when he notices the strong wind, right? He's out there, but then he notices the strong wind, and then he gets frightened, right? And then he begins to sink, right? There's that he starts to pay attention to too many things going on, let's say.
Years ago, I read something either by Marcus Borg or John Dominic Crossan, I can't be sure, which gave this a very metaphorical reading where Peter, the disciples, the boat, are this new struggling entity that's not even a church yet, but these people trying to find a new relationship with God. And so whoever this was read it as just a fairly stark message of you'll sink, you'll go astray unless you keep your faith in Jesus. Unless you keep Jesus as your center of all this, this will come to naught. And so completely moving away from that telling, completely moved away from any supernatural aspect to a miraculous aspect to simply, hey guys, keep your focus here, sort of thing to the new church.
Yeah, right? Especially for a bunch of disciples who just witnessed the feeding of the 5,000, right? And then now they're out in the boat, and yeah, okay.
That's right.
Still don't get it, right? Still don't trust them. Yeah.
Yeah, they've just witnessed a miracle and they're still doubting. Yeah.
I think it's interesting that it says, don't be afraid, but I don't know if it means if Jesus is trying to tell Peter, but don't think that you can do what I can do. I will rescue you, but don't think that you can walk on water. Or do you think he actually wanted him to believe that if you believe in me enough, you can be like me, you can do what I can do? Or was he saying, you will fall, but I will rescue you?
I think a bit of both.
That's a complicated question.
Right? Like, I always I look at this as a metaphor as opposed to a literal walking on water. But it comes back to B'Tselem Elohim, right? Like we are all created in the image of Adonai. I think it's sort of like Jesus saying to Peter, you can do this. And Peter, if you feel you can't do this, let me help you do this. Right. So it doesn't have to me, it doesn't have to be one or the other. It doesn't have to be Peter, I'm the only one who can, Jesus saying, I'm the only one who can do this. And, it doesn't have to be Peter saying, well, I'm never going to be able to do this. I think it's a combination of the two. For me, it's a combination of the two.
I would
right?
tend to agree with that. Yeah. It's not, we don't have to impose a hierarchy here that doesn't necessarily exist. I mean, Jesus said in another text, and you will do greater things than this, So
right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know if that answered the question.
Yeah.
Karen,
No, but fear not, be not afraid, do not be frightened. That's the most often repeated commandment in the New Testament.
Yeah. And even in the Tanakh, right? Like the first paragraph of Joshua. Be not afraid, be not afraid, have courage, be not afraid. Right?
Right.
I thought it was interesting too in this passage, in this translation anyway, immediately was said 3 times, and I don't know, I didn't even notice it until it was being read out loud, but it's like this help will be immediate.
Immediate, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Immediately.
Yeah.
Which, to me shows that, you don't have to call and wait a week for me to show up. Right? I am always here. It's immediate. I am always here. Right? Like,
it's like that poem that says a bird can't sink in air, a fish can't drown in water.
mm-hmm.
It surrounds you, it's part of you, it's always there, it's immediate.
Yes, that's very Zen-like as well, Karen.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, just don't hesitate. Yeah.
So a lot of what getting the message is rejecting false hypotheses, because the first reaction is usually a false hypothesis. The first one, it's a ghost, and that's it. No. I see. You could draw that conclusion, but no, better than that. It's something more to it than that.
Yeah.
And there's I think everybody in the Bible is struggling with first hypothesis and trying to get better explanations for it. The Psalms are certainly doing that. Paul is doing it. Yes, I guess something like that. And I'm taking what you think is there, your natural reaction, but I'm trying to move beyond that. I'm speaking kind of vaguely. You see what I'm saying?
It's almost like you have to get beyond what's observable.
Yes.
To what's underneath.
And I understand why you have a first reaction to things. And then, although actually you can find people who start a whole religion centered around that first reaction. They don't get beyond it. They just keep defending that and make a whole theology of that then. But that's not what good religion should be doing. It should be it's understanding why you could have that reaction, but kind of educating it a little bit, something like that.
Yeah.
And maybe Dale, you mentioned moving beyond what's observable, maybe moving beyond what conventional wisdom has told us, to see if there's some other kind of wisdom that might guide us differently.
Alternative ways of knowing, even. There's all sorts of things there to be considered, I think, right? To get beneath the surface of things, because so much of life plays out on the surface, right? And it was an archbishop some years ago that the Christian's life, like the peace of a Christian, is the peace that comes, when you're in the deep waters, right? You can be on the surface and the storm will be raging, but when you get beneath the surface, right, what you encounter is tranquility and peace. And there's that sense of what are we looking at, and it's very, why is there so much anxiety and so much angst? Because a lot of what we encounter, it's the surface of living.
Yes.
Right, the shallow end of things, as I like to say,
where we feel like we're sinking. And
to use a modern day example, it would be like walking down the street and seeing someone who is panhandling, and it's so instant to absolutely judge that person, right? If they would only get a job, if they would only, but you have to look below the surface. You don't know what that person's story is, right? It's below the surface is the reason that person is standing there, with no housing, with no food, with no employment. It's beneath the surface. It's easy. Yeah. It's so easy to react or to act on surface things, right? But we really do have to take a step back and look beneath, what's apparent to us.
Yeah, right. To what might be hidden, right? Including the presence of God.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
and our own responsibility. And why don't they get a job? Is an indirect question. Is why aren't I helping them? And then resisting that question and pointing at them instead of.
Well, even consider that in terms of in terms of the Joseph story, and that Joseph's dreams might have more to say, and rather than what his brothers just see it being, right? And Jacob does kind of get that because he keeps it in mind, especially on that second dream. But that sense of God's hiddenness, and that's a big deal through that story of Joseph, right? Because it gets to that point, what you intended for harm, God intended for good. Not that God actually, it's just the way that God is at work, even in the midst of those circumstances.
And our actions tend to be based on fear, right? Joseph's brothers were afraid, right? What do you mean he's going to rule over us? Like we're older than him. We're going to lose our birthrights, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's fear, right? And it's the same as encountering someone that society says you should be afraid of.
Right.
You cross the street or you avoid eye contact or whatever. That's out of fear, right? And the fear is there because we don't look deeper, right? Peter's fear was there because he felt the wind and he looked down at the waves on the Kinneret and said, I should be afraid. Right. And we have to move that I should be afraid to how do I change that fear into something productive or whatever, whether it's faith or whatever.
Something bolder, right? Than a reaction.
Yeah.
Back with the Joseph story, if somebody has a summer's getting over, but it's probably a whole summer's project. But I've tried this a few years ago. It just is too long. But there is the book by the German writer Thomas Mann, Joseph and His Brothers. Has anybody ever read that? I've been told by people it's supposed to be a magnificent work. And Thomas Mann is considered by some of the greatest novelists of the 20th century. And so I haven't gone. I took it out and it's a little bit dense reading but it's supposed to be a marvelous work and everything. Thomas Mann was persona non grata in Nazi Germany. He had to leave right away because he spoke out constantly against Nazism, and then he had to come to America in his last years. So somebody has it's over 1,000. It's 4 books and it's over 1,000 pages altogether. So, but it's supposed to be worth a while, but I just never quite got to it. Maybe try another time. So I put it to you to look through.
Good. Okay. Well, it's 11:15. Shall we call it quits for today?
Sure.
See you next week at 10 o'clock.
Next week.
Have a good week, everyone.
See you everyone.
Have a great week.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.